Right now, as you watch this, your brain is being programmed, and you don't even know it. Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing that most people around you, your friends, your family, maybe even you, have stopped thinking. Not stopped having opinions, everyone has those, but stopped actually thinking. The world has become so loud, so fast, so saturated with information that the human mind, once a powerful tool for inquiry and growth, has dulled into passive acceptance. Here's what you'll discover in the next 18 minutes. First, the invisible system designed to shut down your thinking before it even starts. Second, the psychological traps that make even intelligent people believe comfortable lies. And third, the 3 weapons you can use starting today to reclaim your mind before it's too late. By the end of this video, you'll see manipulation in real time. You'll catch yourself before you react. You'll become dangerous to every system that depends on your obedience. But I need to warn you, once you see what I'm about to show you, you can't unsee it. Your relationships might change. Your comfort zone will shatter. Some people won't like the new you. Let's begin. Here's what nobody wants to admit. Thinking is hard. And in today's world, it's actively discouraged. The modern environment doesn't reward contemplation. It rewards speed, emotional reactions, and conformity. And this isn't an accident. From algorithms that feed you only what you want to hear, to educational systems that prioritize memorization over exploration, society is conditioning you away from critical thought. The philosopher Noam Chomsky warned us decades ago. He explained how power structures rely on what he called the manufacturing of consent. In other words, when people are trained to consume without questioning, to agree without understanding, they become easy to manage, and even easier to deceive. Critical thinking, once considered a fundamental human skill, is now seen as inconvenient. It gets in the way of outrage culture. It slows down online debates. It challenges ideologies. It dares to ask, but is this really true? And in a world obsessed with being right, here's the disturbing reality. The average person today processes 5 times more information per day than someone just 30 years ago. Think about that. 5 times. We are bombarded notifications, messages, breaking news, opinions, ads, updates, every single waking moment. Your brain wasn't built for this. When it's overwhelmed, it shortcuts. It relies on mental habits, cognitive biases, and groupthink instead of actual thinking. This is called social proof, and while it's a natural survival mechanism, it can be weaponized. Ever seen a post with thousands of likes and assumed it must be true? That's not reason speaking. That's a psychological shortcut. And it's one of the reasons collective stupidity spreads so easily. Not because people are dumb, but because they're being conditioned to follow signals instead of asking questions. Here's what most people don't realize. Your attention has become a commodity. Tech companies have literally hired neuroscientists and behavioral psychologists to engineer addiction into their platforms. Sean Parker, the founding president of Facebook, admitted this publicly. He said the thought process behind building these platforms was, how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible? They exploit a vulnerability in human psychology, the dopamine-driven feedback loop. Every notification, every like, every comment triggers a small hit of dopamine. Your brain learns to crave it. And while you're chasing that next hit, you're not thinking. You're reacting. You're scrolling. You're consuming. The average person now checks their phone 96 times per day. That's once every 10 minutes during waking hours. Think about what that does to your ability to have a single continuous thought. You can't. Your thinking has been fragmented into 10-minute windows, and most of those windows are interrupted. Neuroscientist Marianne Wolf discovered something terrifying. Our brains are being rewired by digital media. We now skim. We jump between tabs. We struggle to maintain focus on anything longer than a tweet. But here's the catch. Critical thinking requires sustained attention. You cannot analyze, reflect, or truly understand if your attention span is constantly fractured. Ask yourself right now, when was the last time you read an entire article without checking your phone? When was the last time you paused after hearing something provocative? To think rather than react. These small habits once common are vanishing. And here's what's being lost: the ability to hold complex ideas in your mind simultaneously. Reading a book, especially difficult books, trains your brain to build mental models, to connect abstract concepts, to follow extended arguments across dozens of pages. This is cognitive heavy lifting. But when you're only consuming bite-sized content, tweets, headlines, 30-second videos, your brain never has to do that work. The muscles atrophy. Studies from MIT found that people who read physical books have significantly better comprehension and retention than those who read the same content on screens. Why? Because digital reading encourages scanning, not processing. We're training ourselves to be information consumers, not knowledge builders. There's a difference. Information is raw data. Knowledge is information that's been filtered, analyzed, connected to other ideas, and integrated into your understanding of the world. You can consume infinite information and have zero knowledge. That's where most people are living right now. Carl Sagan saw this coming. He said, "We live in a society exquisitely dependent on science and technology, in which hardly anyone knows anything about science and technology." His concern wasn't just ignorance. It was the erosion of the ability to think critically about the systems we depend on. And here's the terrifying part. Most people don't even realize what they've lost. You can't miss a skill you never developed. If you've never experienced what it feels like to think deeply for hours, to wrestle with a difficult idea until you understand it, to follow a complex argument from premise to conclusion, you don't know that capability exists. It's like being colorblind from birth. You don't know what you're not seeing. But here's the deeper truth. Critical thinking is uncomfortable. It forces you to admit you don't know everything. It challenges your ego. It creates cognitive dissonance where your cherished beliefs clash with new evidence. And in a culture that values certainty, confidence, and identity above all, this is terrifying. So instead of thinking, we defend. We retreat into our tribes. We repeat mantras. We cancel, avoid, memorize slogans. We trade dialectic, the kind of honest Socratic dialogue that powered civilization, for echo chambers. What we're witnessing isn't just a decline in thinking. It's a social shift toward mental laziness. And the consequences? Devastating. Because when people stop thinking, they stop questioning. And when people stop questioning, they become vulnerable to manipulation, to propaganda, to fear. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out. In 2016, researchers at Stanford conducted a study on how well students could evaluate information online. The results were shocking. They found that 82% of middle schoolers couldn't distinguish between a real news story and sponsored content labeled sponsored content. College students were shown a tweet from a political activist and asked if it was a reliable source of information. Most couldn't think to ask basic questions like, who is this person? What's their expertise? What's their motivation? High school students were shown 2 articles about gun control, one from a neutral source, one from a lobbying group, and most couldn't identify which had a bias. These weren't dumb kids. They were digital natives. They'd grown up online, but they'd never been taught how to think critically about what they consumed. And here's the kicker: adults perform even worse, because at least students know they're supposed to be learning. Adults think they already know. Their ego won't allow them to admit they're being manipulated. So when they see a headline that confirms what they already believe, they share it. No verification needed. It feels true, so it must be true. This is how misinformation spreads faster than truth. Not because lies are more convincing, but because thinking is harder than believing. Here's the question that should haunt you. Who benefits when a population no longer thinks for itself? Pause this video for 5 seconds. Really ask yourself that question. The answer is anyone who wants to control you. John Taylor Gatto, an award-winning teacher, spent 30 years in the system before he spoke out. Here's what he said. The truth is that schools don't really teach anything except how to obey orders. He claimed that modern education wasn't designed to create independent thinkers. It was designed during the industrial age to prepare workers for factory life, predictable, obedient, non-disruptive. Think about how you were evaluated in school, not on the originality or depth of your thoughts, but on your ability to memorize and regurgitate. Curiosity was treated as a distraction. Conformity was rewarded. The message? Follow the rules. Color inside the lines. Don't ask too many questions. And this pattern doesn't end in school. It intensifies in adult life, in the workplace, in media, even in friendships. You learn quickly. Speaking out, questioning consensus, holding unpopular views can cost you. The fear of social exclusion, of being labeled difficult or controversial, is often enough to silence even your most pressing doubts. So you stay quiet. And silence, over time, becomes complicity. Social media accelerated this to an unimaginable level. What was once a space for global connection has become a battlefield of opinion wars, outrage cycles, and algorithmic manipulation. Every platform is engineered to keep you scrolling, reacting, consuming, not thinking. You're nudged constantly toward content that confirms your beliefs. You're encouraged to respond instantly, emotionally, angrily. The platforms reward engagement, not truth. They thrive on division, not understanding. And in the middle of all this noise, the voice of reason is drowned out. Thoughtfulness appears slow, weak, irrelevant. Why reflect when reacting is faster and earns more likes? Marshall McLuhan saw this in the 1960s. He warned, "The medium is the message." What he meant, the way we receive information changes how we think. Today's mediums encourage speed over depth, outrage over nuance, certainty over humility. Even truth itself has been distorted. What's true becomes less important than what's viral. People no longer evaluate ideas based on evidence or logic. They judge them based on how many people agree. This is the tyranny of the majority in its most dangerous form, not political but cognitive. But here's what makes social media particularly insidious. It gives you the illusion of thinking while preventing actual thought. You read a headline, you feel a reaction. You share it with a clever comment. You feel smart, informed, engaged. But you didn't think, you reacted. There's a massive difference. Thinking requires asking questions. Is this headline representing the full story? What am I not being told? Who wrote this and why? What would someone who disagrees say? Am I being manipulated emotionally right now? Reacting skips all of that. It goes straight from stimulus to response. Pavlov's dog didn't think about the bell, it just salivated. And that's what social media has turned us into. We've been conditioned. The algorithms have learned exactly what triggers you. They know what makes you angry, what makes you righteous, what makes you click. And they feed you more of it. Not because it's true, not because it's important, but because it keeps you on the platform. Former Google design ethicist Tristan Harris calls this hijacking your mind. He says, there's a whole playbook of techniques that get used to keep you hooked. Infinite scroll, autoplay, push notifications, variable rewards, social validation metrics. These aren't bugs, they're features. Designed by the smartest behavioral psychologists in the world to bypass your conscious decision-making and tap directly into your brain's reward circuits. Let me be clear, these forces aren't abstract. They are economic, political, cultural. They are the companies that profit from your addiction to mindless content. The politicians who rely on your emotional reactions. The institutions that depend on your unquestioning obedience. And they are winning. Because the system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed. Stop right here. If what you've heard so far is making you uncomfortable, if there's a knot forming in your chest that's not anxiety, that's your brain protecting old beliefs. This is the moment. The moment you decide, do I keep living comfortably numb, or do I choose to wake up? If you're choosing to wake up, hit that like button right now. Not for me, for you. As a commitment. And in the comments, tell me one belief you're willing to question. Just one. Let's see how brave this community really is. Now let's finish this. Despite our faith in logic, here's the truth. Your brain is far more emotional than rational. Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman proved this. In Thinking, Fast and Slow, he showed that your brain operates using two systems. System 1, fast, automatic, emotional, jumps to conclusions, conserves energy. System 2, slow, thoughtful, analytical, but requires effort. In our high-speed, always-on world, most people are stuck in System 1. There's no time or will to slow down and think deeply. So we rely on mental shortcuts, stereotypes, heuristics, things that feel right but are often wrong. This is fertile ground for manipulation. Politicians, marketers, media outlets, they all understand how to exploit these shortcuts. They package complex issues into simple binaries. They use emotionally charged language to bypass your reason. They prime you with repeated narratives until you accept them as truth, not because you verified them, but because they feel familiar. And here's the danger. Once you accept something as true, your brain begins to defend that belief, regardless of evidence. This is confirmation bias, and it's one of the most powerful cognitive traps in existence. Be honest with yourself right now. How often do you seek out evidence that contradicts your beliefs? How often do you truly listen to opposing arguments, rather than preparing your counterpoint while they're still speaking? If you're honest, probably not as often as you think. Here's another psychological phenomenon that destroys thinking: groupthink. It's when the desire for harmony in a group leads to irrational or dysfunctional decisions. Psychologist Irving Janis documented this everywhere from corporate disasters to historical atrocities. Even highly intelligent, well-intentioned people make catastrophic decisions when they suppress dissent and avoid critical evaluation. Why? Because challenging the group feels unsafe. Going against the grain requires more than intelligence. It requires integrity and courage. And yet, history shows us that progress has always come from those who dared to think differently. Galileo, Darwin, Nietzsche, Martin Luther King. They were all rejected, ridiculed, attacked, but they thought anyway. They spoke anyway. And their willingness to challenge the collective ignorance of their time shaped the world we live in today. Let me tell you about a famous experiment that proves this point. In the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch conducted a study on conformity. He put a person in a room with several actors. He showed them a line on a card, then showed them 3 other lines and asked which one matched the original. The answer was obvious. It wasn't even close. But the actors who went first all gave the same wrong answer. And here's what happened. 75% of real participants conformed at least once. They gave an answer they knew was wrong just to fit in with the group. Some of them genuinely began to doubt their own eyes. The group consensus overrode their direct sensory perception. Now imagine what happens when the question isn't about lines on a card. When it's about politics, morality, identity, truth itself. When everyone around you believes something, when all your friends share the same opinion, when your social media feed is a unanimous chorus, it becomes almost impossible to think differently. Not because you're weak, but because your brain is wired for social survival. And for most of human history, going against the tribe meant death. That wiring is still there, and it's being exploited. But make no mistake, there is a cost to thinking critically in a society that punishes doubt. You risk being misunderstood, ostracized, even hated, but you also gain something invaluable: clarity, self-respect, and the quiet power that comes from knowing that your beliefs are yours, not programmed into you. The real reason critical thinking is disappearing is not because people are incapable of it. It's because they're afraid of what it might reveal. To think critically is to risk everything that gives you psychological safety: your identity, your beliefs, your tribe. And for many, those things are too precious to question. We live in a time when identity has become sacred. People define themselves by their opinions, their affiliations, their ideologies. To challenge an idea is now seen as a personal attack. But this is the illusion that destroys thought, that you are your ideas. You are not your political party. You are not your religion. You are not your social group. You are a human being with the capacity to evolve, to learn, to change. And that journey begins the moment you detach your worth from your current beliefs. So what can you actually do? Here are 3 concrete practices you can start today. Weapon 1, metacognition. Think about your thinking. When you feel strongly about something, pause and ask, what's influencing my opinion right now? Am I open to being wrong? Am I engaging with this idea or just absorbing it passively? Weapon 2, dialectical thinking. Hold 2 opposing ideas in tension while exploring them. This isn't just intellectual flexibility, it's mental strength. It allows you to go beyond binaries, beyond us versus them, and into the realm where real understanding is born. Tomorrow morning, try this. Find one article you disagree with. Read it fully. Don't argue in your head. Just listen to understand. Then ask, what would have to be true for this perspective to make sense? This doesn't mean you have to agree. It means you're exercising the ability to think from multiple perspectives, which is the foundation of wisdom. Most people never do this. They only read things that confirm what they already believe. Then they wonder why they can't understand the other side. It's because they've never actually tried. Weapon 3, strategic silence. Philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti said, "To understand the immeasurable, the mind must be extraordinarily quiet." That stillness so rare in our age is where wisdom grows. 30-second test you can do right now. Close your eyes. Don't try to think about anything. Just notice your breath. Notice how hard it is to stay still. That resistance? That's the noise you need to eliminate. Here's why this matters. Your thoughts are not original. Most of what you think is recycled phrases you've heard, opinions you've absorbed, reactions you've been conditioned to have. But in silence, something different emerges. Original insight, intuition, the quiet voice beneath the noise. The greatest thinkers in history, Einstein, Tesla, Newton, all credited their breakthroughs to moments of quiet contemplation, not frantic research, not endless debate, silence. Einstein said his theory of relativity came to him while daydreaming. Newton discovered gravity while sitting quietly under a tree. Tesla visualized entire machines in his mind during meditative walks. These weren't accidents. They were accessing a different mode of consciousness, one that's impossible to reach when your mind is cluttered with notifications, opinions, and reactive thoughts. Here's a practice you can start today. Every morning, before you check your phone, sit for 5 minutes in complete silence. No music, no podcast, no input, just you and your thoughts. At first, it will feel uncomfortable. Your mind will race. You'll want to grab your phone. That discomfort is proof of how addicted you've become to mental stimulation. But if you push through it, if you practice daily, something remarkable happens. You start to notice patterns in your thinking. You catch yourself before you react. You create space between stimulus and response. And in that space, you become free. This is your invitation, not just to think, but to wake up. To stop living as a product of your environment and start becoming the architect of your mind. Because no school, no system, no social media platform will do this for you. The responsibility is yours alone. And when you rise to it, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see with clarity. You notice when manipulation is being used. Headlines that say, "Experts say," without naming them. Politicians answering different questions than asked. You feel the manipulation in real time. You become a light in a dark room, a voice of calm in a storm of outrage. A grounded thinker in a world of reactionaries. This is what the world needs now, not louder voices, not sharper arguments, but deeper minds. Minds willing to sit in complexity. Minds willing to say, "I don't know, but I'm willing to learn." Minds no longer seeking to win debates, but to understand reality. The rise of collective stupidity is not a cause. It's a symptom of fear, of fatigue, of a world too distracted to look inward. But every act of thinking clearly pushes back against that tide. Every moment you pause to reflect instead of react. Every time you ask a question instead of assuming the answer. Every time you choose clarity over comfort, you reclaim your power. So as we end this journey, remember, the most revolutionary thing you can do right now is not to shout, not to conform, not to repeat, but to think. Let the others sleepwalk through slogans and screens. Let them trade their freedom for validation. But not you. You are awake now, and once you awaken, you can never go back. If this message resonated with you, share it. Not because it's trendy, but because it's necessary. Leave a comment with your reflections, your doubts, the one belief you're willing to question. Because critical thinking doesn't grow in silence, it grows in dialogue. And if you're still with me, know this: you are not alone. There is a quiet revolution happening, a movement not of noise but of minds, not of outrage but of awareness. And it begins every time one person chooses to ask the harder question. Let that person be you. Stay curious, stay awake, and above all, keep thinking. I'll see you in the next one.